After my family went bankrupt, my dad forced me into an arranged marriage. They took a fancy to the gentle and refined older brother, but I was attracted to the moody younger brother. John cornered me in the room, clutching my wrist and coldly asking, "Ivy, are you crazy? The one you're supposed to marry is my brother." I looked at the man who, in the previous life, went almost insane after my death and fought desperately to avenge me. "John, you're crazier than me. I don't like Michael. I like you, John." As my words fell, everyone at the dinner table changed their expressions. "You child." My mom yanked me hard and said, "What are you talking nonsense about?" My dad also frowned tightly and whispered to me to stop making a scene. In their eyes, Michael was outstanding in every aspect, while John was the exact opposite. He was manic, violent, and good for nothing. Hearing my words, John across the table seemed stunned, and the fork in his hand clattered onto the plate. Only Michael managed to maintain his composure and forced a stiff smile. "That's not bad. It's a good thing." The faces of William and his wife turned green, but they kept their mouths shut. After all, although my family was bankrupt, my dad still held a position in the securities industry, and the Wilson family was at a critical juncture of a major project, so they couldn't afford to fall out with us. "Let's eat first. The food will get cold." Remembering that John seemed to have had a stomach problem since childhood, I said calmly. No one at the table said a word and they all lowered their heads one by one. John, with a dark face, buried his head in his food as if he hadn't eaten for ages. I felt like laughing and couldn't help curling my lips. "John, long time no see." It was no surprise that the meal was unpleasant. In the end, only Ivy and John were still eating. One slowly and gracefully, the other gobbling down the food. "Like you've never eaten before. Can't even look up." I glanced at John with his head down and got up, saying I needed to use the restroom. Then I walked towards the corner as if I knew the place well. But unexpectedly, just as I washed my hands and was about to leave, a tall figure flashed in quickly. "What did you mean by what you said just now?" John frowned, with a dark face, leaning against the wall and asking me. I looked at him, tilted my head, and smiled. "Literally. I don't like Michael. I like you. If I have to have an arranged marriage, I choose to marry you." John was stunned and looked at me as if I were a fool. "You don't like Michael, but you like me?" "Yes. Are you crazy?" I twitched the corner of my mouth, not knowing what to say. After all, in John's eyes, where his brother was around, he was just a sidekick. How could anyone not like his brother but choose him? Before I could reply, John's face darkened, as if he was sure I was just joking with him. The next second, he punched the wall beside me hard, with a fierce look in his eyes. "Ivy, I don't care what your purpose is. Stay away from me, or I'll show you what regret looks like. Got it?" I glared at the man in front of me with a stony face, suddenly flashing back to John from my previous life. 3 days after I died, my mangled corpse lay untouched in the morgue. It was him who found me, tears dripping one by one onto me until he finally clutched me with bloodshot eyes. He choked out, "Ivy, don't be afraid. I'll take you home and never let anyone hurt you again." Abruptly, my vision swam, and I trembled uncontrollably. John saw this, panic flooding his eyes as he instinctively tried to back away. "You." In the next instant, I seized his collar and yanked him close, my lips nearly grazing the corner of his mouth. "John, why can you like me but I can't like you back? I'm going to like you anyway." John froze in disbelief, eyes wide, arms raised defensively like he was surrendering, too scared to touch me. When the hell did I ever say I liked you?" "Really don't?" I stared him down unblinkingly, Moments later, a slow smirk tugged at my lips. My fingers glided down from his collar, tracing his chest and abdomen. I shot a glance downward, then what's this for? A fierce blush exploded across John's neck to his ears. He shoved me away violently. Are you insane? Terror seized him as he recoiled half a meter, jabbing a finger to keep me back. So I leaned against the wall with shameless defiance. Dead to the world. What? I just like you. Your parents told me to pick. And I chose you. You're utterly unreasonable. John fumed, the veins in his forehead pulsing as he snarled if I'd lost my mind. I laughed harder. Yeah. I've got a disease that'll kill me without you. John snapped his head away. Snarling fuck. His ears burned crimson. John. What's wrong? Right then, a voice echoed from the living room. Michael was calling. John's face tightened instantly, shooting me a warning glare. I don't like you. After you leave, don't spout nonsense about choosing me. He spun away but stormed upstairs instead of heading to the living room. I watched his flustered escape, and an unbearable ache squeezed my heart. This was the man who'd died a dismembered corpse for me in my past life. The arranged dinner ended on a sour note. Back home, my parents chewed me out without mercy. They raged that I'd been blinded by stupidity, with Michael's top-tier credentials dangling right there. I'd settled for John. You're kicking a gift horse in the mouth. My father blazed with fury. My mother chimed in, pleading for me to invite Michael out later for an apology to smooth things over. As I faced my flesh and blood, my heart clenched. Dad. Mom. What if I told you Michael is a hypocritical bastard? Still set on marrying me off to him? My mother paused, knitting her brows. How could that be? Michael's been famously flawless since he was a kid, no way he's a hypocrite. Then she launched into reassurances, everyone has flaws. And I needed to suck it up. Listen. That John has a bad temper and is incompetent, he might even be the illegitimate child of the Wilson family. What future could you have following him? Follow Michael. All the wealth of the Wilson family will be yours someday. Looking at my mom's earnest dissuasion, I suddenly vaguely recalled that in my previous life, when I was subjected to domestic violence by Michael and beaten half to death. They also advised me to endure. But they had no idea how much torment I suffered. Michael, superficially refined and outstanding, was secretly a violent and paranoid maniac. He grew up under intense parental pressure, relentlessly forcing himself to excel, and all that pent-up resentment and pain eventually transformed into covert acts of violence. Every time he returned home drunk, he would vent his rage by beating me savagely. And the Wilson family's parents were just beasts hiding behind a mask of humanity. Not only did they enable him, but they also helped threaten me. I once tried to reach out to my parents for help, only to face their cold indifference and persuasion to endure. Eventually, Michael escalated his abuse. After tiring of me, he started dragging me to social business events. My life became a living hell. I broke down completely and lost my sanity. Then he orchestrated an accident that ended my life, collecting a hefty insurance payout while playing the role of the devoted, grieving husband to win public sympathy. After my death, my parents never even questioned the truth. Only John. After I died, he snapped and fought back relentlessly, step by step, forcing those who hurt me into a corner. Finally, he embraced my ashes and jumped into the ocean. Closing my eyes, my heart turned cold, inch by inch. In this life, I only want John. I began clinging to John, always using excuses about finding Michael to seek him out. He grew thoroughly annoyed, his face darkening as he chased me away several times. Eventually, he simply started avoiding me. But with a second chance at life, I knew him well enough to track him down easily at a racing club. He was in a black racing suit, broad-shouldered with a narrow waist and long legs, his physique on full display. That was far more revealing than wearing gray sweatpants. Squinting, I bit back a curse about how immodest he looked. As I walked over, I saw a few guys and girls gathering around him. One girl was about to throw her arms around him. I strode up and hooked my arm around John's neck. Sorry, but my fiancé doesn't like other women touching him. With that remark, everyone's expressions shifted instantly. John flushed bright red and pushed me away, stammering, "What nonsense are you talking?" He then awkwardly introduced me as his friend, not his fiancé. The others exchanged knowing glances and laughed it off, changing the subject without prying. But the girl who'd been approaching John came closer again, asking John to take her for a spin. John hesitated, glancing at me. I smiled and said, "Sure." Then I laid a hand on a nearby guy's shoulder. "Hey buddy, could you take me for a ride? I've never done this before, it looks thrilling." The guy's eyes lit up, grinning ear to ear as he agreed eagerly. As I turned to go with him, a force yanked my arm back hard. John, with a dark face, pulled me to his side. "I'll take her." I curved my lips into a smile. In the following days, no matter where John went, I could always find him first. He was sleeping at home, so I went straight upstairs and lifted his blanket. He went out to have fun, and I stuck to him like glue. I just loved seeing him furious yet unable to bring himself to scold me. After a few days of this, the way he looked at me changed. Finally, he warned me fiercely, "If you follow me again, don't blame me for being unkind." I was curious how he planned to be unkind to me, so that night I ran off to the bar he was playing at. He seemed unsurprised and didn't try to chase me away immediately. Instead, he let me sit down and join them drinking and playing games. The drinks, of course, were hard liquor, and the game was the tired old truth or dare. What surprised me was the girl who dared sit next to him. She had clearly had a crush on him for a while, with half her body almost pressed against his. After one game loss, someone egged her on to kiss John on the lips. The girl's face instantly flushed, and she looked at John, saying, "This isn't right, is it?" John's expression was unreadable, but he didn't object right away. So the cheering grew louder. As the girl turned her head to look at John again, I suddenly realized John's intention. He was trying to use this girl to drive me away. Taking a shallow breath, I got a little angry. I knew John had repeatedly pushed me away because he thought he couldn't control his manic episodes. He was afraid of hurting me, even more worried I'd regret it. After all, in his eyes, he was a worthless failure. He didn't like Michael, but at least Michael was outstanding and could give me the happiness others saw. But what about him? Seeing me with Michael, didn't his heart ache? I closed my eyes briefly. When I opened them, I stood up abruptly. The next moment, in front of everyone, I lifted my leg and straddled John. Glancing at the person beside me, I said, "Sorry, girl. He's mine." Suddenly, dead silence fell all around. John's expression changed drastically, and he stared at me, speechless. I lowered my head bit by bit and saw his Adam's apple bob violently. What are you doing?" He managed. As he spoke, I bit his lips. For a moment, the person beneath me seemed to stop breathing, but his burning chest reminded me he was alive. Even after I pulled away, John kept his eyes wide open, as if the sky had fallen. I found it amusing yet baffling, but then felt a sudden pang of sadness. John had kissed me once, in my past life. After I died. After he'd suppressed it for so long. It was just a pity that by then, I had lost all warmth and couldn't feel his heat. Coming back to my senses, John's entire face turned flushed yet pale, and he furiously told me to get off. Then he jumped up with a whoosh and rushed out. "Where to?" The bathroom. John slammed the door hard and glared threateningly at me. You. Don't follow me. I murmured oh and leaned back on the sofa, unable to keep my lips from curving up. How could he be so adorable? Why hadn't I realized it sooner? After John left, the others inevitably had a lot to say about me. I remained as steady as a mountain. The girl from earlier, however, seemed unwilling to let it go. She bit her lip and asked what my relationship with John was. I glanced at her and said she'd just seen it. But John never mentioned you before. She protested. So? I stared back. So you think he likes you? Girl, don't kid yourself about feelings. With that, I got up and moved to another sofa, preferring out of sight, out of mind. What I didn't expect, though, was that some clueless guy would actually hit on me. The man gave me a leering look, saying he wanted to buy me a drink, then laid his hand on my shoulder. I had barely frowned when I heard a rush of air behind me. Before I could turn, the man beside me was punched to the ground. John yanked him up by the collar and snarled, "Are you fucking insane?" The man was almost knocked unconscious when he came to. He struggled wildly. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I offered her a drink. "It's none of your damn business." "Let me go." John's expression turned icy, and he punched him again without hesitation. "Say that one more time. I dare you." Seeing John's mood shift dangerously, my heart sank, and I stood up. But the beaten man had a stubborn streak. He kept provoking John recklessly, yelling that he was crazy. The next instant, John's demeanor changed completely. He snatched a bottle nearby and smashed it over the man's head, then started punching him repeatedly in the face. Blood sprayed everywhere, and amid the shrieking chaos, the situation spiraled. Seeing the man on the ground gasping for air, I gritted my teeth and lunged to grab John. "Enough! Stop it!" John ignored me, his elbow grazing my cheekbone sharply as he swung. Fighting the pain, I clung on, wrenching his head toward me with all my strength. "Look at me, John!" John's fist froze midair, his dark, vacant pupils contracting instantly. Seconds later, his breathing slowed and deepened. Relieved, I pulled him against my chest. "It's okay. It's all over now." Under my steady reassurance, John finally calmed down. An eerie, unnatural stillness. Soon, the police arrived, and I went with him to give a statement. He was quiet the whole time, answered every question calmly, and paid the fine afterward. Once we stepped out of the station, he turned to me suddenly. "Aren't you afraid of me?" I shook my head, but before I could speak, he cut me off. "Ivy, I'm messed up in the head, don't you get it?" He tapped his temple, his obsidian gaze fixed on me, enunciating every word. "I can't control my violence. You chose me, aren't you afraid I might kill you someday?" I opened my mouth. "You wouldn't." I managed. Then he asked me why I thought that. "Without you, I could continue to live a carefree life. But with you around, I have to always pay attention to myself and control myself. You're just a burden. Understand?" My heart skipped a beat. Looking at John in front of me, I said, "Do you really think so? Then what if I say Michael is a hypocritical brute?" Dark madness swirled in his eyes, and his brows gradually knitted together. But he didn't say a word for a long time, as if he was pondering what I meant by these words. I looked at John and nodded after a while. "Fine. You like me choosing Michael, right? As you wish." On the third day after falling out with John, the Wilson family held an early birthday party for Michael. Many upper-class people came to the party, and of course my parents brought me along. However, I never expected that they had conspired with William Wilson and his wife to set me up. Just when I was completely off guard, Michael stood on the stage and said he was going to announce good news. Then he smiled gently and looked at me. Ivy. Come up here. I stood still with a glass in my hand, my brows knitting tighter and tighter. Before I could even react, my parents directly pushed me onto the stage. A round of enthusiastic applause rang out below, followed by a flurry of discussions. Is she Ivy from the Peterson family? Does this mean it's going to be an alliance through marriage? I have to say, they're really a good match. A handsome guy and a beautiful girl. But I heard something happened to the Peterson family recently. So is this the Peterson family climbing up the social ladder? Amid the hubbub, I seemed to be suddenly transported back to my previous life. To my wedding with Michael. The night before the wedding, I caught Michael having an affair. I was so angry that I made a scene and wanted to call off the engagement. But he slapped me hard in the dressing room. That's when he revealed his true nature. But by then, I had no way out. The moment I stepped onto the red carpet, I desperately held back my tears, longing for someone to come and save me. But no one did. John had left dejectedly before that, and I didn't even notice him. Now, standing on such a stage again, I felt almost suffocated. Michael dared to push me to this point because he was sure I had no way out. If I messed things up today, not only would I and the Peterson family become a laughingstock, but my parents would also be disgraced and be taken advantage of by others. Ivy, what are you daydreaming about? Come and tell everyone our engagement date. Michael smiled and stuffed the microphone into my hand. Looking at the false mask on his face, I felt sick to my stomach. Ignoring him, I turned and stared straight at the entrance of the banquet hall. John, I'll only give you 3 seconds. If you don't show up in 3 seconds, I'll make you know what regret means. 3, 2, 1. Bang! A loud noise came from the entrance. Amid the deafening roar of a powerful engine, a sleek black supercar crashed violently into the wall. Ah! Who the hell is this? Are they crazy? Security! Where are the security guards? Someone has barged in. In an instant, the entire banquet hall erupted into screams and chaos. I stared at the somewhat familiar sports car not far away, and the corner of my eye twitched violently. I told you to come, not to fly here. The next second, the car door swung open. A long, shapely leg clad in a black and red racing suit stepped out. Then, gradually, a lean waist and well-defined pectoral muscles came into view. John had a black coat slung over his shoulders. He reached up and removed his helmet. His slightly damp hair swayed gently as his sharp, black eyes locked onto mine. The moment our eyes met, I gasped. Damn it! How can my man be so handsome? John? The second son of the Wilson family? Someone exclaimed. Are they crazy? Driving right into the place. Where are their manners? Manners? Haven't you heard that the second son of the Wilson family is a violent lunatic with a screw loose? My God. Now it seems calling him a violent lunatic is an understatement. There were whispers and discussions all around. Michael beside me frowned deeply. Johnny. You, brother. John interrupted, looking straight at Michael and saying word by word. Isn't it a bit too much to try to steal my girl while I'm away? With those words, the hall fell into an instant silence. My parents and the Wilsons were shocked, while the other guests were completely confused. As far as I remember, Ivy chose to be in the arranged marriage with me, right? John looked at me again, his dark pupils emitting a soft yet extremely sharp glint. In full view of everyone, he walked towards me step by step. What do you think, Ivy? After he finished speaking, John stopped in front of me, slightly bowed, and made an inviting gesture. I stared at his outstretched hand, and my heart started pounding wildly. My eyes suddenly stung. As if crossing the torrent of time, I found myself once again standing on the stage of my last life wedding. But this time, someone had come to rescue me. The moment I placed my hand in John's, he immediately clasped it tightly. The warmth of his palm spread to my fingertips, and I finally truly felt my rebirth at this moment. The nightmare of my past life was gradually fading away. And in the future, it would be our tightly clasped hands. Ivy! Seeing John and me so in love, Michael couldn't hold back his anger and his face darkened. But before he could say anything else, John snorted and pulled me to his side. Ignoring everyone else, he led me straight out of the banquet hall. I originally thought about staying a few more minutes to handle the aftermath. But looking at John's determined profile, I suddenly thought, forget it. What could be more important than him right now? As we walked out of the building, another brand new sports car was parked nearby. Inside sat a man also in a racing suit. When he saw John leading me out, he was completely stunned. Damn. You're really serious. John. You just snatched your girlfriend away like that? Shut up and get out of the way. John impatiently furrowed his brows, snatched the car keys from his hand, and shoved him out. The car's inside. Go drive it yourself, I'm leaving. As the words fell, he had already pushed me into the passenger seat. I was baffled, not bothering to fasten the seatbelt in time. TSK. John grew even more annoyed, his face darkening as he leaned over to help me with it. After several tugs, the damn buckle jammed. Half his body froze right in front of me, stuck between advancing and retreating, his ears flushing scarlet. Fuck this shit. I giggled inadvertently, my chest accidentally brushing his arm. In an instant, John recoiled to his seat like he'd seen a ghost. You do it yourself. He practically steamed all over, his face black as pitch, yet flushed red underneath, leaving the guy outside staring dumbstruck. I cleared my throat and suppressed a smile, buckling the seatbelt myself. The car zoomed off with a rumble, practically tail on fire urgent. I tilted my head slightly, smirking at John's bright red profile. After a while, the redness faded from his neck, but his expression turned grim. That day you called Michael an animal, what did you mean? What did he do to you? The corner of my mouth twitched downward, but I kept my gaze fixed on John. Only now you think to ask? Bit late, don't you think? I replied calmly. Anyway, he wrecked Michael's birthday bash. So we're hitched now. John frowned, saying he hadn't intended such a commotion. If that idiot third brother hadn't goaded me into racing him, I wouldn't have been late. I glanced at the emblem ahead and raised an eyebrow. So this car was the betting prize. Suddenly, I flashed back to marrying Michael in my past life. He'd seemed to crash his car that day. Afterward, he never raced again. My brow creased. But he cut me off. And don't think this means I'm into you or anything. I'm just helping. Okay? Need to figure out what you know. John kept a straight face, eyes on the road. About helping the Peterson family, I'm not as rich or powerful as the Wilsons. But I'll try my best. I narrowed my eyes without a word. Seeing me silent, he frowned, hesitated, then murmured, If you don't want the arranged marriage, no problem. I'll find you other options. John, say one more word, and I'll jump you right here. I glared coldly. 3 seconds of dead silence followed. John turned stiffly, wide eyes filled with confusion and terror. Spouting that now? You're just pulling a hit and run, pathetic and irresponsible. No. That's not what I meant. Then what? Did I mess things up? Waste your time? Or force you? I eyed him, leaning in close. If you didn't want an arranged marriage, why wreck the party in the first place? If you're so aggrieved, just send me back to Michael. At worst, it's death, better than being disliked here. John was stunned. not even looking at the road ahead as he urgently exclaimed, "What nonsense are you talking about? Stop mentioning death." I said, "I didn't mean it that way. I just..." He flusteredly explained, almost biting his tongue. Looking at his face, I suddenly felt a little reluctant to tease him. But if he hadn't said such infuriating things, I wouldn't have intentionally provoked him like this. Remembering the crazy things he did for me in the past, I closed my eyes and said, "Enough." John froze. The next second, I leaned over and kissed his lips firmly. Screech, the tires skidded violently. John made a sharp turn and stopped the car by the roadside. "Ivy!" he shouted angrily at me. John glared but couldn't get the words out. Finally, his face flushed. He spat. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" I raised an eyebrow and said, "Of course I do. But rather than having you send me back, I'd rather die together with you." Click, the seatbelt released. Before John could snap out of his shock, I turned and pinned him against the seat. Glancing at him, I slowly bent down, my lips brushing his mouth, nose, eyes, and finally, I bit his ear. Hoarsely, I said, "Better to die as a charming ghost than an angry, resentful one." As those words fell, I felt John change, his body tensed and stiffened. Smirking, I pressed my hand over his frantically beating heart and softly called his name. "Johnny." The driver's seat was cramped, and the temperature soared suddenly. John's hand on my waist tightened bit by bit, radiating scalding heat. Watching his throat bob nervously, I kissed it lightly. Knock. 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 "Hey. No parking here. Didn't you see theirs?" The traffic cop outside froze mid-sentence. 6 eyes met in dead silence. I slowly arched an eyebrow, thinking, "Officer, you're old enough to have some awareness." Underneath me, John snapped back to reality and exploded. He scrambled frantically to restore some normalcy. But the more he rushed, the more his hands touched places they shouldn't. He was nearly losing his mind. The cop outside couldn't bear to watch and silently turned away. "Well, anyway, get out of here quick. And remember to pay the fine later." Red-faced and muttering curses, he walked off. Inside the car, I sat back in the passenger seat with some regret. Still planning to send me back? "John, no." "Oh. Then need me to emphasize that I want to be with you?" "No. No need." "All right. Can we go home now? I'm tired." John didn't say a word and quickly started the car. I grinned into the window. "Come on. I don't believe I can't handle you." After I left with John, Michael cleaned up the mess. To maintain his image as a gentle and courteous gentleman, he publicly announced that I had chosen his younger brother. Since his brother didn't show up, he took care of me on his behalf. Actually, what he was supposed to announce was the good news between John and me. Finally, he euphemistically said that John also had his merits and hoped that John and I could get everyone's blessings. As soon as he said those high-sounding words, John and I instantly became the targets of public criticism. Some were scolding me, saying that as the daughter of the Peterson family, I didn't choose the outstanding older brother but a good for-nothing. Others were scolding John, listing all the outrageous things he had done over the years. They mocked that he was like mud compared to Michael, and it was no wonder he did such disgusting things. It's a pity for Michael, such an outstanding young man, to be insulted like this. Yeah, but I don't think John and the daughter of the Peterson family will last long. A naive girl and a violent lunatic. TSK TSK. Amid the sighs, I just lay at home planning my own things. After going through what happened in my past life, this was nothing. Currently, the most important thing for me was to persuade John to return to the Wilson family business. If he didn't take back what belonged to him, We would surely face difficulties in the future. Thinking of this, I suddenly got up and hummed a song while doing my makeup beautifully. I hadn't seen John for 2 days, and I was itching to see him. I wanted to see him blush. Just as I finished getting ready and opened the door, I saw my parents sitting in the living room with worried looks on their faces. When they saw me come out, their faces drooped even more, and they asked me where I was going. To the Wilson family. I replied and was about to leave, but my mother stood up and walked towards me. Judging from her expression, I knew she was going to scold me for choosing John without her saying a word. I raised my hand to interrupt her. Mom, don't worry about the family's problems. The Wilson family won't dare not help solve them. As for other things, I looked at my mother and said word by word, you never cared about me before, and you don't need to from now on. I'll give you a life without worries about food and clothing. Other than that, there's nothing else. After saying that, I strode away without looking back. After I died in my past life, my soul didn't dissipate for some reason. So I could see what John did for me. I also saw my parents. I saw them being sad for a while, and then they went abroad on the Wilson family's advice. Later, they adopted a godson abroad. They got over my death soon. I should have guessed it. Although I'm the only daughter in the Peterson family, they don't love me. In the face of money and power, I'm too insignificant. Moreover, they don't like daughters, thinking that daughters will get married anyway. If it weren't for my father's health problem preventing them from having another child, they wouldn't have only me. So after I died, I didn't expect them to be extremely sad. But when I really saw their indifference, my heart ached. At that time, I thought it was meaningless to live again, until I saw John later. I watched him cry while holding my body, watched him completely break with the Wilson family. I watched him avenge me alone. To deal with the Wilson family, he even knelt on the ground and begged others for help. I was beaten half to death, and my leg, which had already been injured, was completely disabled. At that moment, my soul was deeply shaken. I swore that if I had another chance, I would never let John be wronged again. When I arrived at the Wilson family's house, as soon as I stepped through the door, I heard the sound of glass shattering inside. Immediately afterwards, there came William's furious scolding, "If you don't want to stay in this family, then get out. Who do you think you are? If it weren't for the Wilson family, could you have all you have now?" Right after that were Mrs. Wilson and Michael's hypocritical dissuasion. I pursed my lips slightly and already guessed who they were scolding. But given John's personality, would he just let himself be scolded like this? Frowning, I lifted my foot and walked in. I saw that the large fish tank in the living room was broken, and the fish inside had fallen to the ground. But none of them was moving. It seemed that they had died long ago. Besides, there was a bloody ashtray lying on the ground, and John was standing on the floor full of water and broken glass, with blood oozing from the wound on his forehead. In an instant, my chest felt like it was about to explode. They dared to touch John. Were they crazy? I strode forward and walked straight up to John and asked him what had happened. He didn't expect me to suddenly appear. His gloomy face froze for a moment, and he asked me why I had come. "I'm asking you what happened. Who hit you?" Probably because my face looked so grim. John opened his mouth but didn't say a word. On the opposite side, William's face was ashen. He said in a deep voice that he had hit John. So what? Seeing that the situation was not right, Michael quickly stepped out to ease the atmosphere. While comforting his father, he explained to me. He said that Johnny, either because he was in a bad mood or for some other reason, had poisoned his father's favorite fish. Someone had already identified that the powder was a kind of medicine that John took to control his emotions. His father was a bit annoyed and just gave him a scolding. Before he could finish speaking, some scenes from the previous life suddenly flashed through my mind. In an instant, I stared at Michael, wishing I could just go over and kill him. Taking a deep breath, I stood still. I just turned my head and looked at John. "Did you put the medicine?" John was stunned for a moment and said, "Of course not." But then he lowered his head, his face cold, and said, "Forget it. Yes. It was me. It doesn't matter." I said, "Of course it matters. If you didn't do it, why should you take the blame?" After saying that, I looked at the Wilson family members, and my gaze fell on Michael's face. If I remember correctly, he also takes that kind of medicine. Uncle and aunt, why don't you suspect him? Hearing this, Mrs. Wilson was stunned and quickly looked at her son. But she wasn't concerned about whether her son was a suspect. Instead, she was concerned about why her son was taking medicine. There was a momentary stiffness on Michael's face. And then he said that it was impossible. Although he didn't know where Ivy had heard that. He was in good health and never took medicine. Bullshit. I interrupted him calmly and said that he had told me this himself. Michael's face turned black. Just as he was about to speak, I interrupted him again. "If you don't believe it, you can just send someone to check his room." William's face was already ugly. After hearing my successive interrogations and my unrestrained swear words, he became even more enraged. "Ms. Ivy, are you saying I've wronged John? Someone, go and investigate. I'd like to see who exactly has wronged whom." After saying that, two of his subordinates immediately turned around and went upstairs. Michael's face completely changed. He wanted to stop them, but it was too late. He could only watch helplessly as the two subordinates quickly came downstairs, holding a bottle of medicine in their hands. "Mr. Wilson." This medicine was indeed found in Mr. John's room. These words made everyone present change their expressions. But immediately afterwards, Michael stepped forward to explain. He said that he had been under a lot of pressure recently and the doctor had prescribed some medicine for him. Hearing this, Mrs. Wilson quickly stepped forward to show her concern. William seemed to have noticed something, and his face turned red and then pale. "All right. No need to investigate further." Michael glanced at John and said that he would take the blame for drugging. "Dad, you're not in good health. Don't get angry anymore. It'll just make people laugh at us." I almost burst out laughing looking at Michael's hypocritical face. I directly retorted that it wouldn't do and it was better to find out the truth. Michael's eyes flashed. He looked at me helplessly and asked what I wanted, as if he were the one who had been wronged. I remained unmoved and pushed John, who was beside me, forward. "If you, the eldest son, insist on admitting it, then apologize to John. You." William glared at me upon hearing this, but was stopped by Michael. He looked at me calmly with a faint smile, then turned to John and said, "Sorry. I shouldn't have wrongly accused you, brother." But the word brother was uttered through gritted teeth. After he finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. Then John lowered his head and silently dragged me away. Only after we got in the car did he suddenly turn his head and stare at me. I thought he would be so touched that he'd cry, question me why I unconditionally believed in him and protected him so much. Then he'd uncontrollably hug me tightly. Finally, he'd passionately kiss me. But instead, how did you know that Michael was also taking that kind of medicine? Did you go into his room? What's the relationship between you two? I gasped in surprise and was left speechless looking at the man in front of me. Seeing that the car was filled with jealousy, I leaned forward and firmly put my arms around John's neck. The sudden closeness made his eyes flutter. He leaned back and told me not to do this. "Explain it clearly to me." "Exactly." I leaned in and kissed him hard. Different from our previous gentle kisses, This one was more aggressive. He instantly burned with passion. When he pushed me away a few seconds later, he was as red as a cooked shrimp. His eyes were watery, looking as if he had been bullied. I quickly turned my head and sat back in the passenger seat. Amit Ba. If this goes on, I really can't hold it back anymore. I waved my hand in motion for him to start the car first and then listened to my explanation. John mumbled in a daze and then obediently turned to start the car. My heart melted. Regarding the things in my past life, it's not that I didn't want to tell John. First, it was too unbelievable, and I was afraid he wouldn't believe me. Second, the past life was too painful. I suffered, and so did he. I didn't want him to recall those things. So after thinking about it, I made up an excuse. I said that Michael was my former schoolmate, but I accidentally found out at school that he wasn't as he seemed on the surface. So I investigated him in advance for this arranged marriage. The explanation was full of holes. But John didn't ask further. Instead, he said out of the blue that he also went to the same school as me. He asked me why I didn't investigate him. Who said I didn't? If I hadn't investigated, how would I have known that someone had a crush on me since freshman year? John's face changed. When did I say I had a crush on you? I turned my head to look at him and smiled. John realized it later and quickly turned his head back. After that, no matter how I coaxed him, he just blushed and remained silent with his handsome face. Well, what else could I do? I had to spoil him. I told John that Michael and the others wouldn't let us off easily. If we didn't take back the rights in the company that belonged to him, we would end up being ruined and penniless in the end. Only by having capital first could we fight against them. John frowned but said nothing. I knew he had shares in the Wilson Group, but he never managed them, because it was the inheritance left by his biological mother. And the more he got involved, the more he would miss his mother. But in the past life, it was because these shares were snatched away that his situation later became so difficult. I couldn't let us, repeat the same mistakes. I gently touched John's face and looked at him seriously and said, I know you don't like these things. I promise that after we get through this, you can do whatever you want. I'll support you from now on. I'll always be with you. John was stunned, and his pupils trembled violently. The next second, he hugged me tightly into his arms. I blinked, a little confused, but soon he let go of me and said awkwardly, Who wants you to support me? I've got plenty of skills. I wasn't reluctant to fight before. I just worried that if something went wrong, it would implicate the Peterson family. Your parents must be very worried now, right? After a pause, he said in a low voice, If something really goes wrong, run as far as you can. Do you hear me? It dawned on me later why he endured William's scolding at the Wilson family. My heart ached. I decisively looked up and kissed the man on the lips. I'm already yours. Where else can I go? Where you are is my home. John turned his face halfway, and his eyes were dark and unclear. But a few seconds later, he held my hand. The grip was so tight it almost crushed him. Ivy, I won't let you lose. The next morning, my plan with John officially began. In a past life, Michael gave me to his business partners to play with, making me work like a prostitute to gain benefits for him. He even sent me to the beds of some old shareholders to appease the Wilson family. Yet it was precisely this that allowed me to carve each of those people into my memory. I knew exactly how many dirty deeds existed within the Wilson family, who was corrupt, who was clean, who was resourceful, and who was all show and no substance. With my reminders, John quickly obtained leverage over several of these pests. After that, he suddenly appeared at the shareholders' meeting, catching everyone off guard. As a junior assistant tagging along, I watched Michael and some shareholders pale, feeling indescribably satisfied. Someone argued that since John hadn't managed the company for so long, he didn't deserve to call himself a shareholder anymore. John snorted coldly, dragged his chair out with a screech, and sat down. I haven't managed the company, but my shares still generate profits for it. Not like you, Mr. Expert, acting diligent all day while scheming behind the scenes. Under your watch, who knows how much money was skimmed off the top. It's a miracle the company survived this long. The old shareholder turned green in the face. He sputtered that John was slandering him. That after 8 years with the Wilson family, not even the chairman had spoken to him like that. Other shareholders chimed in, accusing John and mocking him for daring to show his face here without any real skills. Michael, aren't you going to have someone kick him out? Having someone like him around chills everyone's hearts. The old shareholder yelled. The crowd then turned in unison to Michael. Michael pinched his brow in frustration. Johnny, you see it yourself, I'd love to let you stay. Sigh. Head back for now. I'll discuss with Mom and Dad tonight about finding you something else to do. As for company matters, you don't need to worry about them anymore. Who says I don't? Is the Wilson family your personal empire now? John cut him off softly. He said his shares were right there, and no one had the right to strip him of his authority. Kai, do you really think I'm wronging you? He narrowed his eyes at that old shareholder, cold glints flashing in his unfathomably dark irises. Then take a look at this. He jerked his chin toward me. Go on. Shove it in his face. I nodded obediently, grabbed a thick file, walked over, and slammed it hard into the old shareholder's face. With a crash, he toppled over in his chair and hit the floor. The entire office fell deathly silent. I brushed non-existent dust from my hands and strutted back to John's side. John stared at me wide-eyed, his expression practically screaming 6 seconds later, the others exploded. Kai's face contorted into a kaleidoscope of expressions. Gasping and heaving, he scrambled up and cursed at John and me. But just then, the file I'd shoved in his face was picked up by someone nearby, the first person John and I had won over. He read the contents with horrified shock, recounting how Kai had embezzled money by abusing his position over the years. One by one, all the dirty laundry was aired out in public. The man surnamed Kai was shocked and horrified. By the time he snapped out of it to grab the documents, it was already too late. That farce ended with him being taken away by the police. But John's first battle within the company officially began. Before leaving, I glanced at Michael's utterly gloomy expression, and my lips curled up very, very slowly. Don't rush, it's just the beginning. Over the next few days, John and I started tearing through the company like whirlwinds. Everyone knew John was volatile and violent, with rumors swirling that he even had mental illness. He didn't bother disciplining people behind their backs. He'd confront you directly and beat you. And you'd just have to swallow your pride and take it. So many people started walking on eggshells, avoiding John whenever possible. Meanwhile, those with issues schemed to push him out. Flaw-riddled proposals, well-laid traps, and time-wasting, impossible to crack projects all got dumped on John. They were convinced he was useless and would inevitably screw everything up. However, after John's revisions, those flaw-riddled proposals were quickly approved and yielded outstanding practical results. He deftly sidestepped the well-laid traps, booting out a few slackers in the process and strengthening the department's cohesion. As for that project they couldn't crack, it was because the Wilson family's rival behind the scenes was manipulating things. And this person, I'd been itching to meet him since my rebirth. XINU's president, Ben, had always been the one Michael wanted to collaborate with in my past life. Unfortunately, Ben looked down on the Wilson family and never relented. Michael even tried to pawn me off to him. But that man was a devoted husband who didn't lay a finger on me. This time around, after a series of maneuvers by John and me, his standing in the company skyrocketed. News reports frequently highlighted him, shifting the perception of this Wilson family's second son from mentally troubled to hidden depths. Many industry insiders began seeing him in a new light, even proposing private meetings. The Wilson family had been managed so tightly over the years that plenty wanted a piece of the pie but couldn't find an opening. In their eyes, John was a rising star and an easy-to-manipulate soft target, perfect for a partnership. In no time, John went from being universally despised to a red-hot collaborator. Meanwhile, Michael, once the center of attention, was now completely ignored. After all, at the previous birthday party, I publicly ditched him for his younger brother in front of everyone. No matter how hard he tried to maintain his image, it raised doubts about his abilities. William was reportedly furious but powerless. And Michael, after receiving a call that Ben had agreed to a meeting, John and I immediately prepared to head over. But when we reached the downstairs area, we happened to run into Michael. His eyes were dark and vicious, his face showing clear exhaustion, so much so that when he first saw John and me, he almost failed to conceal his malice. But he snapped out of it quickly, smiling and greeting us. "John, you've been doing great lately. Looks like Ivy really is your lucky charm." John's expression was indifferent, he barely lifted his eyelids. "Got something to say?" The smile on Michael's face faded slightly as he replied. "No, nothing really. Oh, by the way, I heard you're planning to see XINU's President Ben too. To be honest, it's tough to get the partnership there, and Ben is no pushover. What leverage are you planning to use to persuade him?" Michael casually replied, "Isn't there a plot of land up for auction in East City?" John stiffened at the words, frowned immediately, and said, "That land has absolutely no prospects." "Be serious. John, buying land is a big deal. Don't be reckless. What if something goes wrong with Dad on our case? No prospects? I'll make it have prospects." John cut off Michael, his dark eyes fixed intently on him. "If you can't do it, that doesn't mean I can't." With that, he turned and strode off. I watched his confident, powerful back, my lips curling up involuntarily. That's my man. Following John to the door, I glanced back at Michael. He stood expressionless not far off, looking sullen. At Shinua, Ben seemed to want to give us a hard time because he dislikes the Wilson family, deliberately making us wait as he stayed inside. I didn't indulge him. After 5 minutes with no sign of him, I pulled John to leave. The receptionist's secretary looked startled and rushed to stop us. "Unnecessary. Tell Mr. Foster, he'll soon learn what regret means." I gave John a meaningful look, and he stood up without hesitation. But just as the elevator doors opened, Ben walked out smiling. I'd heard John had a bad temper, but this is even worse. John ignored him, just casting a questioning glance my way. I tilted my head, signaling he could go ahead. Only then did he give Ben a lukewarm greeting. After that, we went to the meeting room and officially started talking with Ben. When he learned we were using the East City land as leverage, his eyebrows shot up. "That plot has a terrible reputation. You know, are you messing with me?" John frowned impatiently. "Believe it or not." Ben's mouth twitched. I choked back a laugh, feeling pretty satisfied inside. That land would be developed by the government and become a hot spot eventually. I'd told John this based on my memories from a past life, and he'd believed it almost instantly. After a pause, I spoke calmly. "Mr. Foster knows who I am. I'm sure. Frankly, John and I are after the whole Wilson family. So we've brought plenty of goodwill." Staring at the man opposite me, whose face had subtly changed, I murmured, "It's just a question of whether Mr. Foster is bold enough to gamble on this." As the words hung, Ben stared at me for a full 10 seconds. Just as he was about to speak, "Hey, Ben, had enough?" John snapped with a fierce glare, danger simmering in his eyes. "What the?" Ben almost lost his cool CEO persona, retorting sharply that he had a wife. John still glared at him, seething with jealousy, barely holding back laughter. I quickly wrapped an arm around my possessive man to soothe him. Only then did John back down, prodding Ben with a curt word. "Deal or no deal, if it doesn't work, we'll find someone else." Benjamin's face turned ashen with anger as he said, "Fine. Fine." I agreed. "All right." With that, the cooperation deal was set. After coming out of New You, I found myself liking John more and more, and I couldn't resist leaning over to kiss him while he was fastening his seatbelt. He glared at me with a dark expression, saying, "Do you understand it's dangerous in the car? Oh, so it's fine when we go back?" "Fine for what? Could you?" He flushed crimson as he choked back his words, unable to utter any reprimand. I smiled and asked, "Could I what? Stop seducing him like this?" He suddenly let out a heavy sigh, his dark eyes fixed intently on me. These things should be initiated by me. With that, he gently pressed one hand against the back of my neck and leaned in to kiss me. I widened my eyes in surprise. For a moment, stars seemed to explode at the corners of my vision. My heart skipped a beat. John kissed my lips lightly, moving with profound gentleness that felt bone deep. My heart was pulled along by him, sinking completely. Soon after, John and I successfully purchased the land in Dongqing. Online, ridicule and vitriol erupted instantly. This John still has a screw loose after all. He bought a worthless piece of land without even looking at it. Sigh. Michael is clearly so outstanding. So why is John such a disgrace? If the Wilson family were handed over to him, it would go bankrupt in less than 2 weeks. For a while, people from the Wilson family also expressed dissatisfaction with John. Several shareholders even banded together to drive John out, calling William in for this purpose. In the conference room, William smiled faintly as he placated everyone, with every wrinkle on his face betraying greed and selfishness. He recounted John's recent actions and dismissed them with a single excuse: my ignorance. Turning to glance at John, the corners of his mouth tightened slightly. "You don't need to handle company matters for now. Go do whatever you want." "What about my shares?" John looked up and asked. William frowned with displeasure, replying, "What do you mean your shares? They belong to the Wilson family." Instantly, John's face darkened sharply. He remained silent, but the chill emanating from him created an intense pressure that plunged the entire room into dead silence. "I'll say this only once," he uttered word by word, staring at William, whose expression shifted slightly. "Those aren't your Wilson families. They're my mother's. You'd better not touch them." William opened his mouth, then stiffened his face, saying, "Nobody cares about his little shares. Michael, cash them out for him immediately and tell him to get out of the company." "No." John met his gaze coldly, stating that he didn't want the money. With those words, the atmosphere in the room became tense and hostile. Everyone thought this meant he wasn't settling for small shares and was preparing to demand larger ones. Yet moments later, John merely made a single request to William. William paused briefly, a flicker of puzzlement crossing his eyes, but he agreed almost without hesitation. Beside him, Michael's brow remained tightly furrowed, his lips moving as if he had something to say. But seeing William's expression, he finally held back. I stood to the side, frowning as my gaze stayed locked on John, watching his eyes grow increasingly dark and cold. My heart clenched painfully. His state wasn't quite right. "John Wilson, let's go?" I thought John would hesitate, be unwilling, or even resist me. But soon, he turned and walked over, boldly holding my hand. He walked out. Only until we got in the car did he not speak a word. His grip on my hand was a bit heavy. I looked down at John's hand, feeling a pang in my heart. John must be thinking of his mother. It was only after I was reborn that I had someone investigate his background. John's biological mother died of illness when he was very young, suffering from a mental illness. I saw a photo of his mother, a very gentle and beautiful dancer. She had long hair down to her waist and liked to wear beige long skirts. In the photo, John was wearing a small suit with a bow tie at the collar, looking delicate and handsome. He was being held by his mother, dancing as her male partner. It was also the last dance in her life. Later, his mother died that winter, and Michael's mother came to the door with her child. What was even harder for him to accept was that Michael was older than him. That meant his father had cheated several years earlier. He was in pain, screaming, and breaking down, but he was just a child and could do nothing. He listened to his mother's words and lived well, but with too much suppressed pain in his heart. He increasingly couldn't control his emotions. "John," I called softly. John immediately raised his head and said he was fine. Feeling his grip tightening on my hand, I sighed and pulled him into my embrace. "If you're unhappy, say it out loud. If you're annoyed, swear. You don't have to suppress any emotions in front of me." John trembled violently, finally releasing my hand. "I'm sorry. I hurt you. It's all right. I know you didn't mean it." John didn't speak. He raised his arms and hugged me. A few seconds later, I heard suppressed sobs against my chest. John gasped heavily, slowly tightening his arms around my waist. Feeling his pain, I couldn't help but moisten my eyes. What one fears most is not death, but being alive and alone. I am that way, and so is he. But holding each other, we will never be lonely again. Don't worry. I'm here. I don't know how long passed before the person in my arms struggled slightly. "Ivy. It's stuffy." I froze and let go of John. He quickly moved away and sat back in the driver's seat, the tips of his ears bright red as if about to bleed. Veins bulged on his neck. I looked down at the creases pressed into my chest and lightly raised an eyebrow. "Stuffy? Looks to me like you were enjoying it." John's face instantly flushed, and he hurriedly started the car. I giggled, the gloom in my heart lifting. After returning, John moved out of the Wilson family. He bought a house on his own, and over the years, he had built up savings from betting on car races, stock trading, and investments. I helped him tidy the house, arrange the furniture, and together we turned that house into a home. He listens to everything I say, claiming that a grown man doesn't need to fuss over such things. I let out an "oh." "How about changing the bathtub to a double one? Or making the glass of the small bathroom in the bedroom transparent?" "Oh, right. The bed in the bedroom isn't big enough. We need to buy a bigger one." John's face started to look unnatural, and he stammered, asking me why. I stood on tiptoe and whispered with a chuckle into his ear. "What if it's not enough for us?" John tensed up all over, and his Adam's apple bobbed quickly. I was completely smitten by his shy little look. Just as I was about to say I wouldn't tease him anymore, the next second, he picked me up around the waist. John threw me onto the bed and even pressed himself on me before I could bounce back. Then came a flurry of kisses. "Ivy, what kind of engagement party do you want?" After the kiss ended, he held my hand tightly and asked. I paused, only then remembering that we had an engagement party to hold. Sons of aristocratic families are very particular, and this set of procedures has to be followed. After thinking for a while, I said to follow his plan as I didn't have any ideas. After all, neither engagement nor marriage left a good impression on me. John was silent for a moment, then hugged me without saying a word. Half a month later, It was the day before my and John's engagement party. The internet went crazy because the land plot that John and I bought was taken over by the government. They were going to develop the area around it vigorously, and the investment was expected to be huge. And the biggest beneficiaries, of course, were the owner of that land and the relevant people. When Ben called, John and I were in his small company. That's right. He had his own company. He separated the shares that belonged to his mother and started running this company that had nothing to do with the Wilson family. William was, of course, extremely happy. He thought John staying was a curse to the Wilson group and couldn't wait to kick him out. But he and Michael probably never thought that this was our plan. Only by completely cutting off from the Wilson family could we stay safe when the Wilson group collapsed. Mr. Wilson, you should have seen the news about that land plot on the internet. Ben expressed his gratitude and then said that he was ready to help at any time if we needed anything. John probably still remembered the grudge from last time. He responded indifferently and then hung up the phone directly. However, when he turned to look at me, the domineering CEO instantly turned into a puppy. His eyes sparkled as he pounced on me. I'm tired. I patted his head soothingly. Hold on a little longer. It'll be over soon. John paused for a while and suddenly asked me how I planned to deal with Michael. Now the online reviews of him were starting to get worse, and many business partners had defected. Should we kick him out at this time and ruin his reputation? No. I looked at John's well-defined face and said that this could only ruin his status, not his reputation. I want him to taste what despair is like. John looked up at me. After a moment, he reached out and placed his hand on my forehead. I'll do my best to get you whatever you want. Don't frown. I was deeply shocked, and my nose felt a bit sour. That afternoon, I said I had some things to do and then parted ways with John. When I arrived in front of that club, my body couldn't help but tremble. Even digging my nails deep into my palms couldn't hold it back. This place was Michael's private club, and it was my nightmare. He kept a group of high-class escorts here for himself and some so-called bigwigs to vent on. More than once, I'd seen girls carried out of rooms, covered in blood. The people who came here weren't human at all, they were worse than trash. Absolute vermin. After a moment, I shut my eyes and stepped inside. Ever since returning after rebirth, I've been scheming ways, and now I've planted an inside informant. When I reached the floor only for top VIPs, I heard faint sounds from the rooms, both obscene screams and desperate cries of agony. Under the kaleidoscopic lights, it was like a twisted hell. Walking through it, pain seemed to shoot through every inch of my body, but I still pushed forward one step at a time. After connecting with the informant, I had him hand over everything he'd recorded. Watching the girl in the video being assaulted and beaten, I clenched my fist so tight it went numb. Once I'd dealt with things there, I got ready to leave. But just as I reached the stairwell, I saw Michael approaching, a trembling girl in his arms, his eyes icy and bloodthirsty. My heart sank, and I quickly retreated. For a split second, I didn't know whether to advance or retreat. Advance, and all my efforts could be wasted. Retreat, and that girl would likely be ruined tonight. Ivy, it's time to go, my subordinate murmured after Michael left. I stood frozen for a few seconds, then tightly shut my eyes. Go back and find a way to save that girl. Michael has been facing setbacks everywhere lately. If he lashes out, he'll kill her. My subordinate tried to stop me, saying that beast or not, he probably wouldn't just kill on a whim. He will. I choked down the tremors in my chest, insisting he absolutely would. I know better than anyone. My subordinate stared at me, then after a pause, bowed his head and muttered yes. As I'd predicted, when they rescued the girl, she'd already suffered a brutal beating. Michael had made her strip naked and lie on shattered glass, whipping her fiercely with a water-soaked whip. Everything except her face, her whole body, even her private parts, was covered in horrific injuries. Michael was like a madman on a rampage, getting more excited with each lash. Just as he was choking her, relishing her gasps, my subordinate burst in and said someone was causing trouble downstairs and threatening to call the police. The moment Michael turned his head, he looked like a demon, but he quickly calmed down. He not only changed into clean clothes but also leisurely ordered his men to handle the girl. Hiding in the shadows, I watched his face, my chest burning with rage. After my subordinate reported the girl was safe, I bolted from the club. In the car, he glanced at me again in the rearview mirror. "Ivy, are you all right?" I jerked my head up, tugged at my damp collar, and said I'm fine. Then, return to the Peterson family? You have an engagement party tomorrow morning. No. Head to Zizouin Villa. I looked out the window, and only John's face filled my thoughts. Right now, all I want is to see him. But what I never expected in any case was that Michael had prepared such a huge surprise for me. Seeing John's villa completely dark, I vaguely sensed something wrong and hurried upstairs. The moment I smelled blood, my heart sank heavily, and I shoved open the door abruptly. The next second, I froze rigidly in place. There lay a completely naked woman at the entrance to the water-filled bathroom, dried blood on her forehead. John was sitting on the floor by the tub, clutching a dagger tightly in his hand. But the dagger wasn't aimed at anyone else, it was pointed at himself. At his own bleeding arm. His eyes were terrifyingly hollow. His face utterly pale, as if he were a walking corpse. When he saw me, he paused only for a half-second before grabbing the dagger and stabbing down again. "Don't!" I lunged over, gripping John's hand firmly. His strength was tremendous, but he held still in our standoff. I turned my head quickly, telling my subordinate to fetch the sedative from the car. The subordinate turned and rushed downstairs. "Johnny. It's me. I'm back." I freed one hand to lift John's face, forcing him to see me clearly. Soaked through, he trembled uncontrollably, yet he managed to shift his gaze toward me. "Ivy? It's me." John showed a pained expression instantly. He struggled to grab my clothes but also tried to push me away. He kept murmuring my name, saying I should leave, that he might hurt me. I stayed silent, just holding his hand fast. Soon, the subordinate came in and helped inject John with the sedative. Even as he passed out, he was clutching my hand tightly. I had the subordinate help carry him to the bed, never letting go. After a moment, I rasped out, "Check if that woman's still breathing." The subordinate turned immediately. In those brief seconds, a million outcomes and escape plans flashed through my mind. That girl on the floor wasn't ordinary, she was the wealthy young woman who'd thrown herself at John at the bar before, Tina. If she died, Ms. Peterson. I paused, tilting my head slightly. She's not dead, just injured on the forehead. The subordinate hesitated and added, "From her physical signs, it looks like she might have been drugged." I blinked, my mind going blank for a moment. Looking down at John's soaked robe, I gave a faint nod. "Understood. Call a doctor to handle it. Test her blood." "Yes." The subordinate took Tina away, leaving the entire room utterly silent. I stayed by John's side, the chill in my heart spreading slowly. If I wasn't mistaken, reporters were probably hidden around John's villa. They were glaring at this place, waiting to expose the scandal between John and Tina, ready to turn tomorrow's engagement party into the backdrop of our disgrace. Clenching my fists tightly, I slowly lowered my gaze. "Michael, since you're in such a hurry, tomorrow will be your death day." More than an hour later, John woke up. He suddenly sat up, crouching like a wild leopard poised to strike. In almost the next second, His fist was about to swing at me. But when he saw clearly who I was, he paused for a moment, then abruptly pulled me into his embrace. "Ivy," he said in a low voice amidst heavy breaths. So it wasn't an illusion. "Ivy, I'm sorry." Hearing this, I closed my eyes for a moment. My throat was sore and scratchy, and the words "it's okay" just wouldn't come out. But in the next instant, I heard John say, "You said you don't like people barging into our home randomly." "I'm sorry." My remaining clarity settled, and I vaguely sensed something. "What else?" John mumbled. "Nothing else. I didn't touch her. Didn't even glance at her. When I hit her, I used an object. Not my hands." I was momentarily stunned, feeling a mix of amusement and dismay inside. But there was also a faint feeling of joy from getting something back. I knew very well that even if John had actually done something with her, I couldn't possibly blame him. But at this moment of learning the truth, I still felt fortunate. "John, thank you. Thank you for cherishing me above all. For being willing to harm yourself just to stay sober. For everything you've done for me." After John sobered up completely, Tina downstairs woke up as well. She was crying her eyes out, saying she had been framed and drugged. But she never dared to look up at John. Looking at her appearance, I tugged at the corner of my mouth, wanting to laugh. John had already told me the whole story. He saw Tina drugged when he returned from outside. Tina was crying and pleading for him to help her. He didn't want to pay attention at first, but then he discovered reporters hiding in the shadows. If he let Tina leave like that, it was highly likely that the young girl's reputation would be completely ruined. She might even be targeted by people with ill intentions. Helplessly, he had to bring her into the villa, but he wouldn't allow her upstairs. Who knew this woman? Reckless and suicidal. Stripped naked and went upstairs trying to seduce John. When John took her out of the car, he accidentally inhaled some powder, and his mind was already fragile. So when he saw Tina, without hesitation, he grabbed something and knocked her out. But under the stimulation of blood and drugs, his own emotions were triggered as well. In the end, he could only harm himself to stay sober. Thinking of the glaring wound on John's arm, my heart felt heavy. Glancing at Tina coldly, I brought up Michael. "Tell her it's Michael who probably tried to mess with her, barring any surprises. But remember this, if you hadn't been acting like a fool yourself, this whole thing might not have happened at all." Tina bit her lip hard, looking pitiful and vulnerable. "I'm not buying this act." Staring straight at her, I enunciated every word clearly. "Let me make one thing perfectly clear. Without John and me today, you'd have been torn apart by other men already. I'm holding you fully responsible for John's injuries. If you have any sense, you'd better follow my instructions from now on." Tina's face turned ghostly pale. Seeing that John wouldn't even spare her a glance, she seemed to finally grasp reality. Her head lowered slowly before she whispered her agreement to everything I said. The next morning, the engagement party proceeded as scheduled. Reporters staked out near John's villa captured nothing but photos of John and me entering and leaving happily. Walking into the banquet hall, I spotted Michael immediately in a dim corner. His face was grim as he listened intently to someone beside him. By the time they finished speaking, his expression had darkened into pure malice. He turned abruptly and snapped quick orders to his subordinates. Watching him panic like facing imminent doom, the pent-up frustration inside me finally began to ease. It begins. Shortly after the party commenced, Michael's mood deteriorated further. Phone calls came incessantly. He kept losing his temper, barking commands to his men, all futile. Glancing at my phone, I saw the breaking news: Wilson Family Company under investigation for suspected tax evasion. "Ivy, this is your doing." Michael's furious shout echoed across the room. I tilted my head up, meeting eyes blazing with absolute fury. Are you fucking insane? What good does the Wilson family's collapse bring yours? You want to be with John? Fine. Be with him. No one's stopping you. But targeting my family? What the hell is wrong with you? When have I ever wronged you? My gaze held steady on the man raging before me. In the past life. I answered silently. True. In this timeline, he hadn't started harming me yet. But the vile acts he'd already committed were enough to warrant his death 100 times over. My silence seemed to make the madness in his eyes overflow. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm violently to pull me aside. Let go! The instant he touched me, my body convulsed. His grip tightened like a vice, threatening to shatter bone. Seeing the fury twisting his features, primal fear surged through me, draining my strength. Don't touch me! Don't touch her! John's voice roared. A fist connected brutally with Michael's jaw, slamming him to the ground. John stood over him, eyes bloodshot, radiating an unnerving aura of bloodlust. Before Michael could rise, John rained down punch after merciless punch, finally snapping back to reality. I rushed forward, afraid he'd lost control. Johnny, he's not worth dirtying your hands. Another heavy blow landed from John, snapping Michael's head sideways. Only my presence made John relent. Though he stopped, the rage simmering in his eyes remained fixed murderously on Michael. I found his reaction unusual but had no time to dwell on it, quickly pulling him away. Soon, every guest crowded around the commotion. Whispers spread like wildfire when they saw John had attacked his own brother, openly questioning his sanity while muttering he was unhinged. Some people left immediately out of fear. In the chaos, I gradually calmed down. I asked John what was wrong, but he shook his head without speaking, his face still pale. I had to drop it for now and told him all the evidence was ready. He glared coldly at Michael not far away and said, "Then let's begin." Just as the hall was in turmoil, a video suddenly started playing on the big screen. The first half consisted of photographs that enlarged one by one, all depicting matters of the Wilson family. It documented the illicit money the Wilson family had earned over the years through trickery and personal connections. It also recorded the illegal activities Michael had committed with insiders after taking over the company. Finally, the video exposed dozens of top executives and even shareholders secretly involved in sex for power deals. Ugly faces appeared one after another on the screen, and the Wilson family's senior executives, who had come for the Wilson family's reputation, looked horrified. Heavens! What is all this? Crazy. They're crazy. Is the Wilson family insane? Ha! That Michael was said to be promising and talented. But this is his talent? The Wilson family is finished this time. Wonder who pulled this off. Better watch your mouth, or the police will haul you in for questioning. Amid the uproar, Michael became the target of everyone's criticism. Countless people pointed fingers and sneered, tearing him down to nothing. Some even said the Wilson family had fallen to this state because of him. Michael, bruised and battered, weaved through the crowd, his face a mix of rage and shame. But right then, a gasp burst from the crowd. What's that? Michael's private club? Everyone turned to look and saw the video playing on the screen. All footage from his club. The girls in the video were pixelated, but their ordeal was crystal clear. Seeing beasts in human form insulting, torturing, and abusing them, the audience fell deadly silent. Michael stood dumbstruck watching those videos. I saw the look on his face slowly turn to despair, and most of my inner bitterness finally faded. You're welcome, you earned this. Scumbags. Those animals are scumbags. Morals are crumbling. How can such filthy, disgusting things happen right here among us? That Michael is a goddamn beast, he deserves to die. Furious curses swept the room, faces full of outrage. no matter how dirty they were privately. At that moment they had to be warriors of justice. Condemning the villain. Thwack! Someone slapped Michael across the face, yelling at him to have some shame. They said the video showed girls the age of their daughters. How dare Michael do this? That slap seemed to flip a switch. Many people surged forward, shoving and cursing at Michael. Michael looked utterly disheveled, fear written all over his face. He desperately dodged and pushed, trying to squeeze through the crowd, but failed multiple times. Under the immense torment, he let out a gut-wrenching scream. At the same moment, police sirens sounded outside. Michael had fled. When the police arrived, he slipped away in the chaos of the crowd. But I had already cut off all his other escape routes, leaving him only a path to ruin. I told the police that he might escape abroad by water. The police were skeptical but still quickly sent someone. And Ivy and John stayed at the banquet hall until all the guests left. We stood on the stage and put on the engagement rings for each other, then gave each other a gentle kiss. Noticing that John still seemed off, I frowned involuntarily and asked him what was wrong. Seeing that I was unhappy, he tightened his grip on my hand. After I repeatedly pressed him, he finally said that Michael knew about his visit to Michael's underground club last night. I was silent for half a second and asked, "And then?" Anger suddenly blazed in his eyes again, and he said in a deep voice, "He also saw the girl you rescued. That girl's name is Chin-Yi." "Chin-Yi?" "Yes," John said hoarsely. "Michael specially had someone find a girl who looks similar to you." I suddenly froze, suddenly recalling the girl's features. She did seem to bear a faint resemblance to me. My heart sank slightly, and I felt a vague sense of nausea. That scumbag Michael couldn't possibly have any feelings for me. Probably he resented me but couldn't vent his anger on me. So he found someone who looked like me. John suddenly kicked over the chair beside him and said that he wished he could kill that brute Michael. Looking at his angry face, I felt an oddly calm feeling inside. Fortunately, everything hadn't gone off track. Fortunately, John was here, gently holding John's face. I kissed him without hesitation. John's breathing grew heavy. A few seconds later, he picked me up and placed me on the table, taking the initiative. The Wilson family business officially declared bankruptcy. William was imprisoned, and Mrs. Wilson was given a suspended sentence. The Peterson family was implicated and most of their property was confiscated. Ivy's father was also removed from his position. But thanks to Ivy's previous precautions, they weren't affected in terms of reputation. This was the greatest safeguard. Ivy arranged a new place for them and then moved in with John, the home they had decorated together before. After John settled Ivy down, he was about to go out again but was stopped by Ivy. "Michael will be caught sooner or later. Stop busying yourself." John looked hesitant. Ivy pretended to be unhappy and said, "What? Am I so unattractive to you now? You don't cherish me once you've got me, right?" Hearing this, John turned around and walked back without a word. He rested his head on Ivy's neck like a big dog, rubbing it back and forth. Finally, he muttered that he just couldn't feel at ease until Michael was caught. Ivy said, "I understand, but we can't waste our time on that scumbag. We're engaged. Are you really willing to let your newly engaged wife sleep alone every night?" Before Ivy finished speaking, John's look had changed. "Ivy, it's only 9 o'clock now. Are you sure?" Ivy smiled. "You little rascal. Getting a bit cocky. It's only 9. So let's go to bed early. I'm not asking you to stay up all night." John looked at Ivy without saying a word, but his ears gradually turned red. Ivy was extremely amused and deliberately goaded him. "You're not incapable, are you?" Later, Ivy was carried back to the room by John and given a good spanking. When Ivy fell into a dizzy slumber, She glanced at the time. It seemed to be just past 12 o'clock. John. I'm here. Hearing John's deep voice, I drifted into a deep sleep. I had no idea how much time had passed when I was suddenly choked by a force, nearly suffocating. Waking up groggily, I realized John had sat up at some point, gripping me tightly with one hand. Sensing his unease, I frowned and held him back, asking what was wrong. But then I was startled, somehow. He was drenched in cold sweat. What's wrong? Bad dream? Or are you sick? Say something. Don't scare me. John. It's okay. I'm fine. But John clutched me tightly, saying he just missed me. Ivy. I love you. Huh? I froze. But before I could react, he kissed me fiercely. The next second, he ripped off the pajamas I just changed into before sleep. When my eyes opened again, my body felt like it had been repeatedly run over by a steamroller. It took me forever just to lift an arm. Grinding my teeth, I tilted my head and cursed under my breath. Oh great. He made up for everything in one go. Didn't he? Planning to quit for life. Is that it? John. Get your ass in here now. I shouted hoarsely, but there was no response from outside. I frowned, thinking to myself that if that idiot dared to leave me alone in bed this early, I'd castrate him someday and have him as my sister. But as soon as my feet touched the floor, a figure came running over. John rushed in carrying breakfast, and spotting me stepping down barefoot, he barked sharply. Don't move. He set down the food, walked over, pinched my ankle in a punitive way, then helped me put on my shoes. I felt a bit overwhelmed but also deserved it. He's my man. After all. Curving my lips, I asked what he made. He said he wasn't much of a cook and just threw together some porridge. Then he brought the porridge over, playfully pretending to feed me, pushing him away in annoyance. I said it wasn't like I was recovering from childbirth. John just smiled at me, his gaze impossibly tender. Looking at him, I suddenly paused, remembering his eyes from the past life when he held my ashes and leaped into the sea, almost identical to now. A surge of warmth flooded my heart, and I leaned down to hold him gently. Michael died at exactly 5 a.m. that morning. Rumor had it he died on the way back after being captured. Some said it was a sudden illness, others poisoning, or that someone shot him dead. Exactly how it happened, I never found out and no longer cared to, because I knew well that John had slipped out early that morning. Stretching lazily, I stepped onto the balcony, soaking in the sunlight. It seemed only then did I truly emerge from the shadows. The days ahead are bright, long, and radiant. Ivy, let's get married. John hugged me from behind. I smiled and said, okay. Then I'll have someone prepare it now. We'll hold the wedding and get married tomorrow. I was dumbfounded. I said, who gets married the day after getting engaged? But I've waited a long time. A very long time. John stared intently at me, sincerity and passion in his eyes. I looked at the man in front of me. My heart softened bit by bit. After a while, I smiled and nodded. Then we'll marry.